and On a Stormy Night, a tale of connection. On a stormy night, a horse entered a hospital carrying a baby. What seemed impossible soon transformed into a story of affection and courage beyond any comprehension. A nurse, moved by an indescribable connection, revealed a secret that would change everything. What was revealed afterward left everyone shocked. Before hearing this emotional account, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. The wind howled with supernatural force on that March night, while Dr. Helen Martinez organized her reports during her shift at St. Cross Hospital. The corridors were exceptionally quiet for a Friday, perhaps due to the storm that kept people in their homes. The doctor watched through the foggy window as heavy raindrops battered the glass, when a sudden commotion erupted in the reception area. Doctor, you need to see this," shouted Martha, the receptionist, with an expression of astonishment that Helen would never forget. Running through the antiseptic corridors, Helen arrived at the emergency entrance and had to pinch herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. There, soaked by the rain and with an almost majestic posture, stood an immense black horse. Its brown eyes conveyed a disconcerting intelligence, but what really made Helen's heart stop was what the animal was carrying delicately in its mouth: a baby wrapped in blankets. Time seemed to freeze. The security guards, paralyzed, didn't know how to act faced with that surreal scene. It was Helen who, driven by professional instinct and an inexplicable connection to the moment, took the first step toward the animal. The horse, as if perfectly understanding the situation, remained still, its eyes fixed on hers. "It's okay," Helen murmured, approaching cautiously. "I'll help." With impressive delicacy, the horse allowed her to take the baby. It was a girl, probably not more than a few weeks old. Despite the cold and rain, the child was surprisingly well protected, although she needed immediate care. "Prepare the neonatal ICU," Helen ordered, but her eyes couldn't look away from the horse, which remained there, as if standing guard. There was something in its behavior that defied any rational explanation. While the medical team mobilized to attend to the newcomer, Helen noticed a small golden medal attached to a cord around the animal's neck. On it was engraved a symbol that she immediately recognized. It was the emblem of the Aurora Behavioral Research Institute, a renowned institution located on the outskirts of the city. The case quickly became the talk of the hospital. Staff crowded the corridors, sharing theories about how a horse could demonstrate such a level of consciousness and protection. Helen, however, was more intrigued by the extraordinarily stable, vital signs of the baby, considering the circumstances. During the following hours, while caring for the little patient, Helen observed through the window the horse, which refused to leave the hospital parking lot. It remained there, under the rain, like a silent guardian. The doctor began to make detailed notes about the animal's behavior, noticing patterns that defied everything she had learned in her years of medicine. In the early morning, when the storm finally began to subside, Helen received a call that would forever change her understanding of the connection between humans and animals. On the other end of the line, a familiar voice introduced himself as Dr. Richard Morgan, director of the Aurora Institute. "Dr. Helen," he said with a barely contained urgency in his voice, "I see you found our Storm." "Storm?" questioned Helen, looking again at the horse through the window. "Yes, that's his name. And there's something you need to know about the experiment we were conducting, something that goes far beyond our current understanding of animal consciousness." Helen felt a shiver run down her spine. As she listened to Dr. Richard's first explanations, her hands trembled and she began to understand that she was about to dive into a story that would transform not only her life, but her entire understanding of the limits of empathy and connection between different forms of life. Dawn brought with it a clarity that contrasted with the mysteries of the previous night. Helen had barely managed to sleep, her mind filled with the revelations shared by Dr. Richard. The Aurora Institute, apparently, was not just an ordinary behavioral research center. It was the epicenter of a revolutionary study on interspecies communication. Driving along the winding road that led to the institute, Helen observed the bucolic landscape that unfolded before her eyes. The research complex emerged among the hills like a modern structure, harmoniously integrated into nature. Storm, the mysterious horse, followed in a specially adapted trailer, escorted by a team from the Institute. Upon crossing the main gates, Helen was greeted by a middle-aged woman, grey hair and lively eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. "Dr. Helen, I'm Professor Betty Adams, coordinator of Project Synthesis. Welcome to our sanctuary." As they walked through the corridors of the Institute, Betty explained that Project Synthesis had begun 5 years ago when they discovered unique patterns of behavior in some animals. "Storm is not a common horse," she explained, leading Helen to a laboratory filled with monitors and sophisticated equipment. "He's part of a special lineage that has developed extraordinary cognitive abilities." On the main screen, magnetic resonance images showed surprising brain activities. "Observe these areas," Betty pointed, indicating specific regions of Storm's brain. "His neural activity resembles that of a human more than a common equine, especially in areas related to empathy and emotional processing." Helen watched, fascinated, the recordings that showed Storm interacting with other animals and humans. In a particularly impressive sequence, the horse could identify people in stressful situations and offer emotional support in an almost human. But that doesn't explain the baby," Helen pointed out, still intrigued by the events of the previous night. Betty sighed deeply before continuing. 3 days ago, we received an unexpected visit at our center. A young woman, clearly disturbed, was seeking shelter. She was pregnant and in premature labor. We helped with the birth, but she disappeared during the night, leaving the baby." "And Storm?" Helen began to understand. "Yes," confirmed Betty. "He developed an instant connection with the child. When the storm began, and we realized that the baby needed specialized hospital care, Storm acted on his own. He always had an extraordinary protective instinct, but this exceeded all our expectations." As they talked, they were interrupted by a young researcher who hurriedly entered the room. "Professor, we found something in the baby's mother's belongings," he exclaimed, delivering a worn folder. Inside, there were documents and notes that began to reveal an even more intriguing story. The young mother, identified as Mary Sullivan, had been a former collaborator of the Institute, participating in initial experiments of Project Synthesis years ago. "This changes everything," Betty murmured, quickly leafing through the papers. "Mary didn't choose our institute by chance. She knew about our research, about Storm's special abilities." Helen observed through the laboratory window as Storm was led to a spacious enclosure. The animal maintained a proud posture, but its eyes seemed to search for something or someone. "And now?" she questioned, feeling that she was just beginning to unravel the layers of that mystery. "Now," Betty responded, "we need to find Mary. But more importantly, we need to understand why she specifically chose our institute and what is the true nature of the connection between Storm and the baby." A soft notification sound interrupted the conversation. It was a message on Betty's cell phone, which immediately made her pale upon reading its content. "The preliminary analyses of the baby's DNA just came in," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And there's something in the results that, well, you need to see this." Helen approached to read the results, and her heart raced as she understood the implications of that information. The mystery was just beginning to unfold, and each new discovery seemed to open doors to even more extraordinary possibilities. The DNA test results projected on the laboratory screen defied any conventional explanation. Helen had to sit down as she absorbed the information before her eyes. The genetic structure of the child presented anomalies never before documented in medical literature. "It's as if there's an additional genetic signature," explained Dr. Richard, who had joined them in the laboratory, "something that's not completely human, but also doesn't fit into any other known pattern." Betty manipulated the three-dimensional holograms, showing the DNA sequences, enlarging certain sections. "During Project Synthesis, we discovered that some animals, like Storm, possessed a rare genetic variation that allowed an extraordinary level of neural development. But this is different." "Did Mary work specifically with this research?" questioned Helen, mentally connecting the dots. "She was our epigenetic specialist," confirmed Betty. She studied how environmental experiences could modify genetic expression without altering the DNA itself, but she left the project abruptly 3 years ago, taking with her some controversial theories. At that moment, an alert sounded through the Institute's loudspeakers. On the main laboratory screen, security cameras showed Storm demonstrating agitated behavior in his enclosure. The animal neighed in a peculiar way, his eyes fixed in a specific direction. "He's calling for someone," Helen murmured, remembering the horse's protective behavior the night before. Richard quickly accessed other cameras in the complex, and that's when they saw it. A hooded female figure stealthily crossing the woods that surrounded the Institute. Storm continued neighing, as if trying to establish communication. "Mary," Betty whispered, immediately recognizing her former collaborator. The team mobilized, quickly, but with caution so as not to frighten the visitor. Helen, driven by an inexplicable intuition, decided to approach first, accompanied only by Storm, who had calmed down as soon as he was released from the enclosure. At the edge of the woods, they found Mary, a young woman of not more than 30 years with penetrating green eyes and an expression that mixed fear and determination. Upon seeing Storm, her eyes filled with tears. "You took care of her," said Mary, her voice choked with emotion. "I knew you would understand." The horse gently approached, touching Mary's shoulder with his muzzle in a surprisingly delicate gesture. Helen observed the interaction, realizing there was much more to this story than mere coincidences. "Mary," Helen began softly, "your daughter is safe, but we need to understand what's happening. Her DNA—" "It's not an anomaly," interrupted Mary, her voice gaining firmness. "It's evolution. What we discovered in Project Synthesis was just the beginning. Some animals, like Storm, are not just more intelligent. They've developed a form of consciousness that transcends the barriers between species." Mary pulled a flash drive from her pocket and handed it to Helen. "Everything is documented here. My research, the experiments, the discoveries that forced me to leave the Institute. It was beyond what we were prepared to accept at the time." "And your pregnancy?" questioned Helen, feeling they were approaching a crucial revelation. "It was planned," Mary answered, her eyes meeting Storm's, "but not in the way you imagine. During my research, I discovered that the expanded consciousness of these special animals could influence human development from conception, not through direct genetic modification, but through a phenomenon I called empathic resonance." Betty and Dr. Richard, who had silently approached, exchanged significant looks. The implications of that revelation were revolutionary. "My daughter," continued Mary, "is the first human being born with the natural ability to establish a direct neural connection with other species. Storm didn't just protect her. He recognized her as part of something bigger, something that could forever change our understanding of consciousness and evolution." A soft baby cry echoed through the communicator Helen carried, and both Mary and Storm turned their heads simultaneously in the direction of the sound. It was as if they could feel the child's presence, even at a distance. "We need to protect her," said Mary, her voice filled with urgency. "There are people who aren't prepared to accept what she represents. That's why I had to leave, why I needed to trust Storm to take her to the hospital." Helen realized they were at a historic crossroads. Mary's discoveries not only challenged conventional science, they offered a glimpse of a future where barriers between species could finally be dissolved. In the weeks following Mary's return, the Aurora Institute transformed into an epicenter of frenzied activity. Scientists from various fields were summoned, all subjected to rigorous confidentiality protocols. Little Sophia, the name chosen by Mary for her daughter, became the center of an unprecedented study in the history of science. Helen, now fully involved in the project, divided her time between the hospital and the Institute. Her medical experience, combined with her newly discovered connection with Storm, made her a fundamental piece in understanding the phenomenon unfolding before them. A particularly sunny afternoon, Helen observed through the mirrored glass of an observation room. On the other side, Mary held Sophia in her arms, while Storm carefully approached. What happened next made everyone present hold their breath. Sophia, only 2 months old, extended her small hand toward Storm's muzzle. The moment they touched, the monitors capturing both of their brain activities exploded in a symphony of colors and patterns. "It's amazing," murmured Dr. Richard, analyzing the data in real time. "Their brainwaves are synchronizing at a frequency we've never seen before. It's as if they were conversing," completed Betty, her eyes shining with excitement. Helen felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't just communication. In the conventional sense, it was a fusion of consciousnesses, an exchange of perceptions and emotions that transcended language. In the days that followed, the team documented dozens of similar interactions. Sophia demonstrated an extraordinary ability to understand and respond not only to Storm, but to a variety of animals brought for the study. Dogs, cats, even an orangutan named Oliver, all seemed capable of establishing a deep bond with the child. "It's as if she were a bridge," explained Mary during one of the many team meetings. "A bridge between our consciousness and theirs. Through her, we can finally begin to understand how other species perceive the world." However, with each new discovery, new concerns also emerged. News about a special baby began to circulate in restricted scientific circles, attracting the attention not only of idealistic researchers, but also of entities with less noble interests. One night, while Helen was working late analyzing data, she received an unexpected visit. It was Jack, one of the Institute's security guards, with a grave expression on his face. "Doctor, I think we need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. "I've been observing some strange things in the last few days. Suspicious cars in the vicinity, mysterious calls. I think someone is very interested in what's happening here." Helen's heart raced. They had been so careful with security and secrecy, but perhaps not enough. The magnitude of the discoveries they were making was simply too great to remain secret for long. That same night, an emergency meeting was convened. Dr. Richard, Betty, Mary, and Helen met in the most secure conference room at the Institute, protected against any type of surveillance. "We need to consider the possibility that Sophia is not safe here," began Dr. Richard, his voice heavy with concern. "If the wrong people discover what she is capable of doing." "We can't simply hide her," protested Mary. "What she represents is bigger than all of us. It's a chance to completely transform our relationship with other species, to heal the wounds we've inflicted on the planet." Helen, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "What if we could do both? Protect her and continue the research, but in a way that nobody would expect?" All eyes turned to her, curious. "There's a wildlife sanctuary in the country's interior," continued Helen. "It's managed by an old friend of mine, someone I trust completely. It's isolated, protected, and has an incredible diversity of species. It would be the perfect laboratory, hidden in plain sight." A thoughtful silence filled the room as everyone considered the proposal. It was Betty who finally broke it. "It's risky, but it might be our best option. The question is, how would we transport Sophia, Mary, and all the necessary equipment without attracting attention?" It was at that moment that a soft neigh echoed from outside. Through the window they could see Storm, standing majestically under the moonlight. His intelligent eyes seemed to convey a clear message. He had a plan. Helen smiled, instantly understanding. "I think our friend here has just offered us the perfect solution." As the group began to elaborate the details of their audacious plan, no one noticed the small red light blinking discreetly under the conference table, a sign that perhaps their precautions had not been sufficient, and that unknown forces were already one step ahead. Dawn had barely peeked over the horizon when an unusual caravan left the gates of the Aurora Institute. At the front, a specialized trailer transported Storm, followed by a convoy of seemingly ordinary vehicles. To any unsuspecting observer, it might appear to be just another animal transfer for some equestrian event. However, hidden in a secret compartment of the trailer, protected by cutting-edge technology, was little Sophia, nestled in her mother's arms. Helen, seated beside them, constantly monitored the child's vital signs through miniaturized equipment. "Are we safe?" whispered Mary, her voice barely audible above the purring engine. Helen nodded, trying to convey a confidence she didn't completely feel. Dr. Charlie is waiting for us at the sanctuary. Everything is prepared. As the landscape gradually changed from urban to rural, the tension in the air was palpable. Every gas station, every crossing, every vehicle that passed them seemed a potential threat. In the front seat, Dr. Richard drove with his eyes fixed on the road, occasionally checking the rearview mirror. Betty, at his side, alternated between consulting a highly encrypted digital map and monitoring radio communications. It was during a stop to refuel at an isolated roadside gas station that the first sign that something was wrong appeared. While Richard filled the tank, Betty noticed a black car parked at the edge of the property, its occupants observing the convoy with suspicious interest. "We have company," she murmured into the communicator. "Don't look, but I think we're being followed." Helen's heart raced. She instinctively moved closer to Sophia, who slept peacefully, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. It was at this moment that something extraordinary happened. Storm, until then calm in the trailer, began to neigh in a rhythmic and peculiar manner. To everyone's surprise, other horses nearby, ordinary animals on a neighboring farm, responded to the call. In a matter of minutes, a small herd formed around the gas station, creating a living curtain that effectively blocked the view of the mysterious observers. "This is our chance," said Richard, quickly understanding the situation. "Let's go now." With almost military precision, the convoy returned to the road, taking advantage of the providential distraction. Helen couldn't help but marvel at Storm's intelligence and perfect timing. The following hours were a mixture of tension and hope. The planned route was abandoned in favor of secondary roads and little-known paths. Betty, using her contacts, managed to organize a series of safe posts, farms and private properties where they could briefly rest and change vehicles. It was during one of these stops, already at twilight on the second day of travel, that Helen had a moment of clarity that left her breathless. Watching Sophia play carelessly with a puppy on the porch of a farmhouse, she realized the true magnitude of what they were protecting. "It's not just about communication between species, is it?" she said to Mary, who was observing the scene with a mixture of pride and concern. Mary smiled sadly. "No, Helen, it's about evolution. Sophia. She might be the next step, a bridge, not only between humans and animals, but between what we are and what we can become." The conversation was interrupted by an alert from Betty. "We have to go now." On the horizon, vehicle lights were rapidly approaching. There was no time to question how they had been found. In minutes, they were back on the road, this time in a desperate race against an invisible enemy. It was in this moment of desperation that Storm once again proved his inestimable value. The horse, somehow aware of the danger, began to emit sounds that Helen had never heard before. To her surprise and astonishment, birds began to gather in the sky above them, forming patterns that seemed to confuse and disorient their pursuers. "It's unbelievable," murmured Dr. Richard, watching through the rearview mirror as the vehicles following them were forced to slow down, lost in a cloud of birds. Night fell, bringing with it a dense fog that seemed to embrace and protect the convoy. Helen, exhausted but determined, looked at Sophia, who slept peacefully. The child smiled in her sleep as if she knew that, even amid chaos and danger, she was protected by forces that went beyond human understanding. When they finally crossed the gates of the sanctuary in the early hours of the morning on the third day, it was like entering another world. The diversity of life surrounding them was breathtaking, and there, waiting for them with a tired but welcoming smile, was Dr. Charlie. "Welcome," he said, his eyes shining with a mixture of scientific curiosity and human compassion. "I think we have a lot of work ahead of us." As they unloaded the equipment and settled into their new accommodations, Helen couldn't help but feel they were on the threshold of something truly revolutionary. What Sophia represented, what she could teach the world, was greater than any of them could imagine. But as she watched the sun rise over the sanctuary, illuminating a landscape of wild and untouched beauty, Helen also knew that the true journey was just beginning, and that the challenges they would face in the days, weeks, and months ahead would test not only their scientific determination, but also their own understanding of what it means to be human in a world shared with so many other forms of conscious life. The first rays of sun penetrated through the window of the improvised laboratory in the heart of the sanctuary. Helen, with deep dark circles evidencing sleepless nights, attentively observed the monitors displaying a hypnotic dance of brainwaves. At her side, little Sophia, now 6 months old, played carelessly with a baby chimpanzee. "It's simply extraordinary," murmured Dr. Charlie, adjusting his glasses while analyzing the data. The neural synchronization between Sophia and the animals becomes more complex every day. It's as if she were developing a universal language. Mary, who rarely left her daughter's side, smiled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "She's growing so fast. Sometimes I have the impression that she understands more than she should for her age." The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of discoveries and challenges. The sanctuary, with its vast diversity of wildlife, proved to be the perfect environment to study Sophia's unique abilities. Every day brought new surprises. It was on a particularly hot afternoon that an incident occurred that left the entire team speechless. A young elephant had been injured, and the veterinarians were struggling to calm it enough to treat the cut on its foot. Sophia, who was observing everything from a distance in Helen's arms, began to make soft, almost musical sounds. To everyone's amazement, the elephant calmed instantly. More than that, it approached, gently extending its trunk toward the child. What followed was an interaction so profound and intimate that it left all those present moved. "She's not just communicating," said Betty, tears in her eyes. "She's healing." The implications of this discovery were enormous. In the days that followed, the team documented dozens of similar cases. Sophia seemed capable not only of understanding animals, but of influencing their physical and emotional well-being in ways that defied conventional science. However, with each new revelation about Sophia's abilities, concern for her safety also grew. Despite the precautions taken, rumors about a miracle child began to spread beyond the boundaries of the sanctuary. One night, while the team discussed the latest results, an alert sounded through the security system. Surveillance cameras captured suspicious movements in the forest surrounding the complex. "They've found us," said Richard, his voice heavy with tension. Panic threatened to set in, but it was at this moment that something unexpected happened. Storm, who had become a constant and protective presence around Sophia, emitted a powerful neigh. Within minutes, a cacophony of sounds echoed through the forest, roars, chirps, howls, as if the entire animal population of the sanctuary was responding to a silent call. Helen, guided by an intuition she didn't completely understand, took Sophia in her arms and went out to the veranda. What she saw left her speechless. A living barrier of animals had formed around the complex, predators and prey side by side, united in a demonstration of protection that defied all logic. "It's incredible," whispered Mary, joining them. "It's as if all of nature were uniting to protect her." As they observed the surreal scene, Sophia extended her small hands toward the forest. A profound silence fell over the sanctuary, broken only by the soft sound of the child's breathing. It was as if at that moment a silent conversation was happening, an exchange of promises and understandings that transcended the barriers between species. The intruders, confronted with this demonstration of nature's force, retreated. But everyone knew this was only a temporary victory. The outside world, once aware of Sophia's potential, would not rest until they had her. In the days that followed, the team worked tirelessly, not only to continue their research, but to strengthen the sanctuary's defenses. Advanced camouflage systems were installed, blending cutting-edge technology with techniques inspired by nature itself. Meanwhile, Sophia continued to develop at an accelerated pace. At 7 months, she already demonstrated an understanding of the world around her that rivaled that of much older children. Her connection with animals deepened, revealing levels of empathy and communication that challenged everything known about cognitive development. It was during one of these observation sessions that Helen had an epiphany. Watching Sophia interact with a diverse group of animals, she realized they were witnessing more than just an advance in communication between species. "It's evolution in real time," she told the assembled team. "Sophia is not just a bridge between humans and animals, she's a glimpse of the next step in planetary consciousness. Helen's declaration hung in the air, laden with profound possibilities and implications. As the team digested this realization, Sophia, oblivious to the magnitude of her own existence, continued to play and interact with her animal friends, her innocent laughter echoing through the sanctuary like a promise of a future where barriers between all forms of life might finally be dissolved. But with this promise came an immense weight, the responsibility to protect and nurture this evolutionary potential while navigating the very real dangers surrounding them, weighed on each team member. And as the sun set on another day at the sanctuary, everyone knew that the challenges they would face in the coming days would test not only their science but their very humanity. The sanctuary had transformed into a microcosm of harmony between species, with Sophia at the center of everything. Now almost a year old, the girl exhibited abilities that surpassed even the most optimistic expectations of the team. Her capacity for communication with animals had evolved into something that could only be described as a form of interspecific telepathy. On a particularly significant morning, Helen observed Sophia interacting with a diverse group of animals, a young elephant, an orangutan, a wolf, and an eagle. The scene before her seemed straight out of a fairy tale. The child, seated in a circle with the animals, appeared to be conducting a silent but deeply meaningful conversation. "It's as if she were mediating a council of beings," murmured Dr. Charlie, who had joined Helen in observation. "Look how they respond to her, as if they were consulting her." Mary, who rarely left her daughter's side, nodded with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "She's growing so fast, not just physically, but in understanding. Sometimes, when I look into her eyes, I see eras of wisdom." It was at this moment that something extraordinary happened. Sophia, still at the center of the circle of animals, began to emit a soft, almost musical sound. To the astonishment of all present, the animals around her began to respond, each in its own way: the trumpet of the elephant, the howl of the wolf, the cry of the eagle, and the guttural sounds of the orangutan, creating a natural symphony that echoed throughout the sanctuary. The effect was immediate and surprising. Plants around seemed to lean toward the sound, flowers instantly bloomed, and a palpable sensation of something permeated the air. "My God," whispered Betty, who had just arrived running, attracted by the phenomenon. "Look at the readings." The monitors that constantly measured the brainwaves of Sophia and the animals around her were in a frenzy. Patterns never before seen danced across the screens, showing a neural synchronization that went beyond anything ever recorded in science. "It's not just communication," said Helen, her voice trembling with emotion and awe. "It's communion, a fusion of consciousnesses at a level we couldn't even imagine." The phenomenon lasted several minutes, during which all those present felt touched by something greater than themselves. When it finally ceased, Sophia looked at her mother and smiled, her eyes shining with an understanding that went far beyond her age. "Mommy," she said, speaking for the first time in words all could understand. "They understand. We all understand. Now." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of distant applause. The team turned, alarmed, to see a figure emerging from the forest. To everyone's shock, it was none other than Dr. Ethan Wilson, a renowned evolutionary biologist who had disappeared years ago after publishing controversial theories about collective consciousness among species. "Impressive," he said, approaching, with a gentle smile. "You've succeeded, or rather she has succeeded." The tension was palpable. How had he found the sanctuary? What did he know? But before anyone could react, Sophia stood up and walked toward the newcomer, extending her small hand. "You came," she said simply. "They told me you would come." Dr. Ethan knelt to be at the child's level, his eyes watery. "Yes, little one, I came, and I think we have much to discuss." In the hours that followed, Dr. Ethan revealed that he had spent the last few years living among indigenous communities and studying shamanic practices around the world. His research led him to believe in the existence of a latent planetary consciousness, a living neural network that connected all forms of life. "What Sophia is doing," he explained to the assembled team, "is awakening this consciousness. She is the catalyst for an evolution that was dormant in our collective DNA. The implications were enormous. If what Dr. Ethan was saying was true, and recent events seemed to confirm his theory, Sophia was not just a prodigy child or a genetic anomaly. She was the harbinger of a global transformation in how all species related to each other and to the planet. As night fell over the sanctuary, the team found themselves facing a monumental dilemma. Sophia's potential to transform the world was undeniable, but so were the dangers. How could they protect this precious gift while sharing it with a world that might not be ready to receive it? The answer, as so many times before, came from Sophia herself. While the adults debated, she approached Storm, who had become her constant guardian. Stroking the majestic animal's neck, she said aloud, clearly enough for all to hear, "We can no longer hide. The world needs to remember who we really are, all of us together." And so, under the starry sky of a night that promised the dawn of a new era, the team began to plan not just how to protect Sophia, but how to help her fulfill the destiny for which she seemed to have been born, to reconnect humanity with the web of life from which it had long distanced itself. The path ahead would be challenging, full of dangers and uncertainties. But looking at Sophia, surrounded by her animal friends, with Storm as her faithful protector, Helen felt a wave of hope. Perhaps, just maybe, they were on the threshold of something truly extraordinary. A transformation that could heal not only the divisions between species, but the wounds that humanity had inflicted on the planet for so long. Dawn brought with it not just a new day, but the promise of a new era. The sanctuary, once a secret refuge, now prepared to become the epicenter of a global consciousness revolution. Helen, Mary, and the entire team had spent the night in intense discussions, planning the next steps with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Sophia, now almost 2 years old, exhibited a maturity and understanding that defied any conventional explanation. She had spent the last few weeks in deep communion with the sanctuary's animals, as if preparing for something monumental. "It's time," said Sophia, her voice soft, but carrying an unshakable certainty. "The world needs to remember." With these words, a sequence of events that no one could have predicted began. Using a combination of cutting-edge technology and Sophia's unique abilities, the team prepared to transmit to the world a message that would change everything. Dr. Ethan, working tirelessly with Betty, developed a neural amplification system that would allow Sophia to extend her empathic connection beyond the limits of the sanctuary. Storm has always remained by the girl's side, as if understanding the magnitude of the moment. When everything was ready, Sophia walked to the center of a circle formed by various animals, from the smallest birds to the majestic elephants. Helen, Mary, and the rest of the team watched, barely breathing, as the child closed her eyes and concentrated. What happened next was beyond any expectation. A wave of invisible but palpable energy emanated from Sophia, amplified by the technology developed by the team. Within seconds, reports began to arrive from all over the world. People on all continents reported extraordinary experiences. Many spoke of a sudden and profound connection with the nature around them. Others described visions of an Earth pulsating with life, where all creatures were interconnected. In urban centers, stray animals and homeless people gathered in harmony, sharing moments of mutual understanding that defied logic. In the Amazon rainforests, indigenous tribes reported that the spirits of the forest had awakened. On the African savanna, hunters dropped their weapons, touched by a sudden understanding of the sanctity of all life. In the oceans, whales and dolphins emitted songs that echoed around the globe, as if participating in a universal chorus. Global. Media went into a frenzy. Images of people hugging trees, communicating with pets in ways never before seen, and experiencing ecological epiphanies flooded social media and the news. At the sanctuary, Sophia remained at the center of the circle, Storm by her side, both radiating an aura of peace and purpose. Mary, with tears in her eyes, watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and admiration. "She's doing it," whispered Helen, amazed. "She's awakening the collective consciousness of the planet." Dr. Ethan, monitoring the data flowing through the equipment, nodded solemnly. "It's not just her. Sophia is the catalyst, but what we're witnessing is the awakening of a latent capacity in all living beings. She's reminding us of who we really are. As the hours passed, the phenomenon only grew in intensity. Governments around the world met in emergency sessions, trying to understand and respond to what was happening. Scientists from all fields sought explanations, while spiritual leaders spoke of a fulfilled prophecy. At the end of the day, when Sophia finally opened her eyes, the world was no longer the same. The girl smiled, exhausted but satisfied, and simply said, "Now they remember. Now we can heal." In the days and weeks that followed, humanity found itself facing an unprecedented opportunity. The sudden connection with nature and with each other led to rapid and profound changes. Environmental policies were drastically revised, conservation practices gained new momentum, and a global wave of compassion and cooperation swept away ancient conflicts. The sanctuary, now known worldwide, became a center of pilgrimage and study. Sophia, protected but no longer hidden, grew as a living symbol of hope and transformation. Helen, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them here, realized this was just the beginning. The global awakening initiated by Sophia opened doors to possibilities they were only beginning to understand. As the sun set on this new world, Helen watched Sophia playing with Storm and other animals. The connection between them, once extraordinary, now seemed a reminder of the dormant potential in every human being. "What happens now?" asked Mary, joining Helen. Helen smiled, her eyes shining with the promise of the future. "Now, my friend, we learn. We learn to live in this new world that Sophia has helped us rediscover. And who knows, perhaps this is just the first step in an even greater journey." And so, as night fell over a transformed planet, the story of Sophia, the child who reminded humanity of its connection to all life, continued to unfold, promising a future where the boundaries between species would be just memories of a distant past. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Sophia's extraordinary journey has touched your hearts and awakened in you a new consciousness about our connection with all forms of life. To continue exploring the themes addressed in this story, we have prepared a special playlist with equally inspiring narratives about the relationship between humans, animals, and the planet we share. You can find it by clicking on the link to the left. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the wonders and mysteries of our world. Don't miss our upcoming content. Who knows what other extraordinary revelations await us? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Have you ever felt a special connection with an animal or with nature? How do you imagine a world would be where all beings could communicate with and understand each other? We're eager to read your reflections and continue this fascinating conversation. Until the next story, friends.